What a day. What a few months in DC for digital assets. I'm so honored to be here today with Bo and Tyler, two faces who are leading from the administration position on this technology. I'm excited to jump in, and I wanted to start with just hearing a little bit about you guys. These are new positions in government, and it's no secret that the last administration was largely antagonistic towards digital assets. So, just let's level set for everyone. Can you guys explain your roles a little bit? What's a day-to-day? Bo, I know you've been doing this for a few months now. Tyler, a few weeks. What's your day-to-day? How should the industry view your positions?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to start. So, look, this is a sea change for this industry from an administrative perspective. Broadly, this industry has been beaten down and kicked down for the last decade and a half, and specifically for the last 4 years under the Biden regulatory regime. And President Trump has made it very clear that he wants to deliver on the priorities for this industry. We want to make sure that we can welcome technological innovation in the digital asset space here in the United States, and hence why our office was created. So for us, we view ourselves really as an administrator and/or Sherpa between interagency activity, White House policy, industry, and what's happening on Capitol Hill. All of these things have to come together in order for us to actually make monumental change that can revolutionize the way that financial systems work. And so that's really what we've been focused on for the last 2 months. I think that we've made tremendous progress. There's still a lot of work to do. It makes it a lot easier when we have phenomenal actors at Treasury like Tyler, and we have folks, at the SEC like Hester, incoming at the CFTC like Brian. These are all actors that understand how important it is for the United States to lead the charge in this arena. And so we're capturing that. We're moving forward, and we're moving quickly. As David, our AI and crypto czar, likes to say, we're moving at tech speed, and I think that's a good thing. These are private sector actors that are in these roles, and I think that we're testing the hypothesis that many Americans had, which is what happens when you take private industry folks, inject them into government, and how quickly can we move? And I think we're proving that it can be done very expeditiously.
I totally agree with what Bo said. This is a newly created position at the Treasury Department, sitting in the Secretary's front office. I serve as his principal counselor on digital assets, and for those of you who don't know Treasury, that encompasses a bunch of different things. It encompasses how we interact with finance ministries across the globe. It encompasses how we sell the U.S. policy message internationally. It covers the terrorism and financial intelligence verticals, so the OFAC and AML regulatory regime, and domestic finance, working with our counterparts, whether they're bank regulators or market regulators across the U.S., and then getting the pleasure to work with this guy every day. So it's a new position at Treasury, and I think, honestly, the institutional body is very excited to have the position because it's a cohesive structure at Treasury. And as Bo noted, we've had 4 years of regulatory morass at best, and at worst, like we've seen the weaponization of the government against an industry. And now we have a cohesive, progressive strategy towards the sector of how to onshore the activity. And people at Treasury are happy to have that infrastructure exist.
And what a testament to U.S. leadership on digital assets. The fact that these are new positions. The fact that, within the first few months that the White House and Treasury have created this position so we can prioritize this industry for the first time. So it's a huge testament to what President Trump is doing to correct some of that regulatory morass. And we're seeing that as well in Congress. And so I have to ask you about stablecoin legislation, because that has been the topic of the day. There seems to be bipartisan momentum in Congress for a federal framework. We've seen great progress out of the Senate with the Genius Act, moving out of Senate Banking Committee. We just saw today there was an updated House Stable Act draft, and there's a markup next week on the House Stable Act. How's the administration viewing these proposals? From the perspective of strengthening the U.S. dollar, why is it critical we get a bill to President Trump's desk ASAP?
Well, the president made it very clear at the first ever White House Crypto Summit that he wanted to see both stables and market structure on his desk before August recess. And I think that our colleagues over on the Hill are doing a phenomenal job of making that a realization. And so we're just pleased with the work that they're doing to expedite this process. Obviously you've mentioned with stables, the injection into U.S. Treasuries that this will cause is enormous for U.S. dollar strength. It's enormous, really, for just the implementation of new technology into the global financial marketplace, as you talk about payment rails and institutional adoption. And that's one thing that we'll work on with Treasury and other actors inside the internal working group is, you can pass amazing pieces of legislation, but we also have to work on mending the gap between that institutional acceptance. And I think that's one thing that we're keeping our eye on the ball with. But, we're moving along expeditiously. They are as well. I think that we will deliver on the president's wishes to see these two bills on his desk before August. recess. And we're just going to continue to encourage them. If we need to act as referee, I'm sure we can do that. But I think that they're doing phenomenal work, and we're extremely pleased with everyone up there. From Whip Emmer and his progress there. Subcommittee Chair Brian Stile. I'd be remiss not to mention Chairman Hill, and then obviously Chairman Scott on the Senate side, along with his staffers. I mean, they've come together in really a way like we've never seen before with the bicameral working group they've established between both chambers. I mean, this is a monumental step. In terms of the Capitol Hill perspective of them saying, look, we're going to work together to get these monumental pieces of legislation through, and I think that the industry should be extremely excited about that.
Yeah, well, Bo tilled a lot of soil there, so what I'll say is that Congress is a pretty good organizational optimization body, and we see both of the authorizing committees working in the same direction to accomplish the goal of figuring out exactly we have the right rules of the road for programmable money on the internet. That's a big thing. And we see them doing that sort of in a consensus operation. And so it looks like we're going to get something pretty quickly, knock on wood. And as Bo mentioned, if we can help expedite the process and work with our partners in Congress, we're always glad to do that.
And Tyler, you're a veteran of Capitol Hill. Just explain to everyone how rare that is to find that bipartisan, bicameral consensus on an issue.
It's tough. I worked for Senator Tillis, who's on the Banking Committee from 2017 to 2018. And during that time period, we had 2 markups in the Banking Committee. Since that time, I think there's been 1 markup in the Banking Committee. So it's a huge deal in Congress to have a bipartisan vote out of the Banking Committee. That's quite rare, and you don't see it that often. And same thing from the House side. We've seen sort of fits and starts over the years relative to stablecoin legislation. We're seeing a much more concerted, time-focused effort, and it's really great to see.
Bo, you mentioned the President's Working Group on digital assets. On day 3 of the administration, President Trump signed the executive order to strengthen American leadership in digital financial technology. It was a landmark EO for prioritizing this industry. It established that working group, of which Treasury and several other agency heads are a part of. What's going on with the group? How is the group working together and staying aligned? What does coordination look like with all of those different players that are in that group?
Well, Tyler and I have worked very closely in terms of just delivering with the landmarks that are outlined in the CO. So you have the 30-day landmark, which basically stipulated that interagency actors that are part of the group, along with White House offices, do an internal audit review of anything they're touching related to the digital asset space. And those reports were due at that 30-day mark, and then we just hit the 60-day mark this past Monday, on the 24th, in which the same actors were to come together and provide recommendations from each of their agencies about what we should do related to their space, right? So we're in the process of compiling those reports, and then we'll work towards the 120-day landmark in the CO to provide a comprehensive report to the President about how we should see things going as it relates to digital assets in the industry more holistically. I'm sure that Tyler and I will be neck deep in paper over the course of the next few weeks, kind of just working through these recommendations, pulling them all together in a comprehensive format, and providing a clear, initiative as to what we're going to do from the executive side of things. But in the grand scheme of things, our job is to make sure that everyone's singing from the same sheet of music, and the President's made it very clear that his priority is to eradicate anything that undergirded Operation Choke Point 2.0. I think we're working towards that very expeditiously. We're going to continue to do that, just to ensure that industry actors can have the ability to interact with institutional finance and TradFi folks. And this President's been very clear that as a working group, we need to come together and make sure that this is accomplished. And I think Tyler would say we're well on our way of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I can add is being one of the working group participants working at the direction of Bo and David. It's been very seamless. What we have seen on the 30-day timeline and the 60-day timeline is pretty cohesive across the government execution against that. So I think about it sort of as other parts of the government do retrospective reviews. We did a retrospective review on the 30-day basis, and then have been making internal decisions about what we want to recommend to work on a 60-day basis. So it's very seamless. There's just a lot to do because of how rough the past 4 years were. So just rationalizing some of the internal issues at hand is quite voluminous, but I think we're working in such an expedited fashion that I have no doubt that we'll land in a good place.
Yeah, I'm definitely not envious of your guys' schedules. I can't imagine how much work there is to try to correct
Maybe I'll just add one other thing. One of the things I think that we've done so differently versus where the government has been in the past on digital asset and the related technologies is we have an open door policy. Like we talk to everyone who wants to have their voice heard, and so we have to balance sort of the time spent doing that and also the time sort of working to execute against all of the activities that we want to do.
Yeah, and moreover, I'll add to that, I think it's no different than the rest of this administration, right? I think this has been the most transparent executive branch that we've had in quite some time. And so, the way to view both Tyler and I as you approach us is, come talk to us about what you see. We want to know what your concerns are. We want to know what challenges you face as a business here in the United States. Our job is to create an environment in which you can thrive. And that's the ultimate goal. As President Trump said, look, we want to welcome in the golden age for digital assets in the United States of America. In order for us to understand what that looks like, we need to hear from you. And I know that Tyler's taken it upon himself as well just to have as many industry meetings as possible because we look at it in this role as having an ability to take what you're dealing with and translate that into something that's more digestible and palatable for folks that might not interact with this industry on a day-to-day basis. So, the more that we can convene together as a group, we're all rowing in the same boat in the same direction, the better off we'll be in terms of delivering on legislative priorities, interagency action, and we can actually, do what the president has described, which is make this the crypto capital of the world.
And I don't want to volunteer you guys for more meetings, but I really do think you both believe that. About transparency and meeting with everyone. I've watched you both operate over the last few months, and you've been meeting with almost every industry player I can think of. And so I think it's important to double down on that for the audience. What does it mean for folks to reach out to you guys? Why is it so important that you are transparent and open, you have an open door policy?
Well, maybe I'll take the first stab and let Bo play cleanup. Since Treasury has such diverse and voluminous interests in the area across the whole of the building, we have a team of 50 plus people who are working on this every day with me, and I call it the dog meeting internally. It's the Digital Asset Working Group. We have lots of very interested, smart, capable people who are working on the issues every day, and we only know what we know, and we could benefit from knowing what we don't know, and that's why it's so important to engage with industry to hear what we don't know.
I think it's absolutely right, and I echo exactly what Tyler has said. The reality is, in order for us to know what's happening in real time, we have to hear from folks that are dealing with it. And I think that ultimately industry knows best. This is what you guys live, breathe, and sleep. We can do our best to keep as many balls in the air as possible, but at the end of the day, there might be something that impacts your particular vertical that we're not aware of. And so just ensuring that we're hearing from you on a frequent basis allows us to actually accomplish what we need to deliver the best result for you all, really, at the end of the day, and for the United States of America.
And Bo, you mentioned, something that's important for you is that all of the regulators, in addition to industry, all the regulators are singing from the same song sheet. Always, all working collectively to try to push that industry forward. And I think through this working group, it's really happening. That's not just something you're saying, you're seeing it play out firsthand.
Well, I think that this working group gives us the ability to have conversations with multiple parties that are involved in this space in a way that we haven't seen before. Tyler's doing a phenomenal job as well, just working on internal coordination with the working group members. There are White House offices that obviously have opinions, whether it be from the NEC to the OMB, and we're pulling everyone in the same room and saying, guys, let's flesh these things out. Let's do what's in the best interest of the United States and make sure that industry actors can thrive here. I had a question thrown at me last week in New York at the Digital Asset Summit in which they said, what's your message to folks that have been offshore for the course of the last few years? And really, it's quite simple. It's welcome home. We're going to create the most friendly regulatory environment that you've seen for this space. We're going to provide the pathway for institutional adoption to occur. And the way that we do that is really working together. And I think that's why it's so important, this panel specifically, for Tyler and I to be sitting up here discussing these things, because I think it shows that we're working together on this. It's not just a sole effort. It's all of us, and that includes you guys in the audience as well.
Yeah. And I think success in the future looks like we've onshored activity that's been pushed offshore, and we've created a durable regulatory framework for stablecoins and for market structure, and it exists to stand the test of time. That's success in my mind. Yep.
Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about another executive order that came out of this administration. Less than a month ago, President Trump signed an executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a U.S. digital assets stockpile. Bo, why was now the right time, immediately out of the gate, to take that step, and what message does it send to the world about America's commitment to digital asset leadership?
Well, we've been very clear from the White House that we akin Bitcoin as to being digital gold. We don't say this lightly. We truly believe in that statement. And, look, you have to look at Bitcoin as being unique, right? It's a commodity, it's not a security. It has the immaculate conception, as our AI and cryptos are, David Sachs likes to say. It has intrinsic stored value. So, when we were looking at how do we create a reserve in a way that best benefits the United States and the American taxpayer, we said, look, there's been over 400,000 Bitcoin in possession of the US government. Unfortunately, we prematurely sold half of that for about $370 million. If we would have held on to it, it would be worth nearly $17 billion today. So we have to capitalize on what we currently have, and then we have to find ways to expand it. I mean, the question that journalists like to frequently ask me is, how much do you want? And my answer to that is, we want as much as we can get. Now, granted, it has to be done in budget-neutral ways that don't cost the taxpayer a dime, and we truly believe in that. But as the president likes to say, we have a lot of high IQ people, inside of this administration. And I think with that, we've given Treasury the authority to look into ways to navigate that process, and obviously the Secretary Lutnick at Commerce as well. And we'll come together as a working group and determine what the best feasible path forward is in terms of acquisitions. But the timing was now because we couldn't afford to lose out on the prospect of harnessing the value of this real-world asset.
And Tyler, this EO puts Treasury at the center of a big strategic shift, tasked with driving many core initiatives within the EO. Can you walk us through how Treasury is approaching this, and what are early things looking like in response to the EO at the agency?
Yeah, and I'll be a little careful this for obvious reasons because we're knee-deep in the thick of things. But in general, the architecture is that the President's executive order tasked Treasury with really establishing the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and the digital asset stockpile, and initially contemplates that those separate offices will be capitalized by finally forfeited digital assets. So there's lots of legal work that's going on in the background. There's lots of I would call it sort of forensic conversations that we're having about how to best operationalize that, and we're having deep custody conversations on the same tune. So what we're going to do and what we're going to shoot for is establishing the most secure and the most safe way of custodying the digital assets that have been finally forfeited, and doing it in a very methodical process.
Let's look ahead. We've got 4 years we know of this administration. What does success look like for both of you? You've touched on a little bit throughout the conversation, but what does that look like 4 years from now if we're sitting on this stage? What's that look like?
I'll be very blunt about it from our perspective. I think that we want to make the United States the crypto capital of the world, and that means providing a pathway for innovation here. That means creating the most regulatory-friendly environment that could possibly exist so that you guys can thrive and the industry can thrive. I mean, at the end of the day, you can do a lot through interagency activity, but things also have to stick. So what I'd like to see is Congress deliver on what the president's wishes are, which is getting stables and market structure on his desk before August recess. I'd like to see, with Taiwanese activity working through interagency networks, getting rid of anything that undergirded Operation Choke Point 2.0, and really establishing the United States as being the leader in terms of digital technological innovation as it relates to digital assets. And I think if we do that, that would be a tremendous success.
I jumped the gun a little bit earlier, but to answer what I already said, having a rationalized stablecoin market in the United States that is signed into law is a huge deal. Echoing what Bo said, having a market structure regulatory regime that is in law and cleaning up some of the mess that we've been left with, those are 3 big success points, I think, and onshoring the activity that's been pushed offshore. Ultimately, we want the tech innovation and the developers to come back in the United States, and that's what success looks like.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are your administration leaders on digital assets. Please join me in giving it up for Bo Hines and Tyler Williams.